If you want solutions, you must focus your mind. Introducing your host, Mason Hargrave.
This week, I sit down with Chris Gardner, Chairman and CEO of US Health Futures, a company which focuses on developing novel financial instruments to increase efficiency in the healthcare market. On the heels of my interview with Owen Muir, I thought it would be fun to compare and contrast how another friend of mine has proposed a solution to the same problem. He is also the co-founder of iValue, a technology consultancy based here in New York City, which he founded after an extensive career as a specialist at McKinsey, principal at Kearney, vice president at Bain & Company, and partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers. The strategies applied by iValue are detailed in Chris's book, The Valuation of Information Technology, a guide for strategy development, valuation, and financial planning. I was introduced to Chris by his friend and my mentor, Professor Arthur Ramirez at UC Santa Cruz. Chris readily welcomed me to New York back in 2019 and has consistently blessed me with excellent guidance and engaging conversations ever since. Without further ado, I introduce to you Chris Gardner. Okay, thank you for coming on. I know that you are a consultant. So that is a different style of problem solving than perhaps the previous guests that we've had on, who have largely been scientists or one is a medical doctor. So I was hoping that we would get to see the contrast between how it is as a consultant. The constraints of consulting leads you to solve problems differently than maybe a scientist or a medical doctor. So the first question I have is, as a consultant, you solve problems for clients, and the clients sort of give you the problem packaged. In what way do you find a client that has a problem that is worth you solving, or that is worth it to them to hire you to solve? What is client prospecting like as a consultant?
Well, first, let me just say thank you for inviting me to join you here today.
Let's get the
live from New York.
That's right.
And the microphones and all of this remind me of my rock and roll days when I was at Bronx High School of Science.
Oh, there you go.
I was in a rock and roll band, so a little louder than this, but
you can't flip them off like if flip these moving like this. You have to keep it in front of your face, or else.
Well, I had a guitar. I didn't have to.
You can't.
Microphone.
They can't hear you.
So I probably have to learn a little bit more microphone technique.
That's right.
But well, in consulting, prospecting is difficult unless you are an established firm.
Right.
If you're a McKinsey or BCG or a Bain or a PricewaterhouseCoopers, you've been in business for, in some cases 100 years. And so you have a reputation and you've got a network, and very importantly, you have something called a master agreement with a Fortune 500 company, which is essentially a special deal where you provide a discount to the Fortune 500 company if they agree to purchase a certain amount of consulting from you. And sometimes there's some reciprocity. We're getting into the some of the less known things about consulting, but sometimes there's reciprocity where a consulting firm will use a client's product and in return, and buy a lot of it, and in return the company will reciprocate. And so those are competitive advantages. It's reputation, it's relationships, it's things like that have been built up over the years, which makes it very difficult for new consulting firms to get established and to create a pipeline of business.
So maybe I should ask the basement level question, which is, what is a consultant?
Well, a consultant, I think, is I would describe them as a problem solver, but it's a business problem that's being solved, which can often be as difficult as a technology problem. My focus is on technology strategy, that kind of thing. So it's a combination of technology and business problem solving. But a consultant is essentially a type of problem solver. There are different firms that focus on different types of problems, essentially. So management consulting firms will deal with the issues of top management, which are often strategy, deep, high impact types of problems. In fact, management consulting you might describe as high stakes problem solving. But other firms might solve more mundane problems. They might be accounting related or HR related, or functional. So there's quite a range of consultants. Some are very specialized. Some are more general practitioners. My personal experience is in management consulting. So that's traditionally strategy, the issues that are of concern to the most senior executives in a company.
And so how did you even get in on the ground floor or something like that? As in, your background, actually, if we can step way back, is you started in physics as an undergraduate.
Mm-hmm.
So going from that transition from physics into getting your master's in business and then getting into consulting, that's a number of transitions there. And I suppose the question is, how do you get from if I take you from being a experimental high energy physicist at the University of Chicago, how do you end up in New York City as a consultant?
It's a great question. There are really two ways to get into consulting. And it's through the recruiting process, how they recruit. The first way is on campus. They'll recruit on campus, and they typically recruit from MBA programs, not exclusively. They do hire undergraduates, and they do hire graduate students, postdocs, PhDs, and so on.
They do that. They do that type of recruiting here through the Tri-Institutional Consulting Club.
Mm-hmm.
They have a number of different consultancies who hire out of Rockefeller and Cornell and Sloan Kettering for specifically biotech consulting.
Mm-hmm. That's relatively new in terms of consulting, which is probably in the last 10 or 20 years, roughly.
Right.
They've been doing that. And I think that's a very good thing, because it actually helps to know something about a subject for some of the companies that one is serving. So campus recruiting is very important. The students tend not to be jaded, have high energy. They've learned the latest techniques, and it's a very good experience. We can talk about that some more. The other way is they're industry hires. So those are less common. It turns out I was an industry hire, but I had an MBA and I was relatively young. So,
what industry was that?
I was in the computer industry. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, I was a member of Central Engineering at Digital Equipment Corporation.
And that was semiconductor?
I was a semiconductor product manager there, and then I moved up the chain, so to speak. I was involved in workstations. I product managed several of their workstations, and then moved up to their high-performance computers, the VAX systems. So I was a product manager there, and I enjoyed it. It was in Massachusetts. I loved the work. I loved the company. It was a very democratic type of company. The engineers were excellent. MIT was not far away, so we got some top talent engineering-wise. It was really an exceptional company from an engineering standpoint, and I was a member of the team that developed and brought to market some important products. The last product I managed, the VAX 8600 and 8650, which this is a long time
What were
ago.
those used for?
They were general purpose, high performance computers.
Who was buying them?
Everybody. Yeah.
Were they really common? If I was a computer nerd, would I know what they were? As in, I'm not a big
back
historical
then, yeah,
computer nerd.
you would have known. We sold the 8600 and 8650. I think we sold $1.5 billion worth of those machines in like 2 years.
Wow.
And this was a long time ago. So this was this was a lot of fun. And one thing about engineering is you want to be part of a product that actually gets used.
Right.
The worst thing is to work very hard and engineer something and then nobody uses it.
Right.
So the fact that these turned out to be popular was quite satisfying. So I wasn't looking for a job in consulting. I'd gone. The full story is I went to Chicago to study physics, which was a wonderful experience. Terrific professors, Jim Cronin. I worked at Fermilab during the summers and met Mel Schwartz there, who was one of the discoverers of a particular type of neutrino, very famous, but very approachable, a terrific fellow. And I was working side by side with him on 12-hour shifts for a summer. He was actually a professor at Stanford at the time, but was at Fermilab because of the experiment. And got to know him well and asked him, after I knew him well enough and I felt like I could ask him these questions, I asked him what would he do in terms of his career if he were in my shoes. And he told me he'd go into technology. He wouldn't go into physics, which really shocked me because he was a full professor and had a terrific reputation. So basically he had made it in physics. And I knew he had a company on the side. It was called Digital Pathways in Silicon Valley. And he told me the story of Steve Jobs asking to audit one of his classes, one of his physics classes, and Mel agreed to let him do that. And at some point, Steve Jobs asked Mel if he'd be interested in investing in his company. And Mel declined, which was one of his great regrets.
A young Steve Jobs says, "Hey, do you want some Apple stock?"
Exactly. I think they needed to buy some parts for their computer, the PC. So Mel got exposed to the electronics opportunities at Stanford and started up a company, and it was doing well. And this would be, the late 70s. So Intel was coming into its own. Intel had a terrific strategy, corporate strategy of moving these chipsets up the price performance curve to ultimately compete with mainframes. They were thinking very far ahead, and they saw the potential of semiconductor technology. So this was really an ideal time to get into technology, and I had to listen. Mel and I both went to Bronx Science, and we had a nice connection, and I knew he wouldn't steer me wrong. So that was really a key point in my career trajectory that without Mel's influence, I would have I probably would have just kept doing what I was doing.
What do you think is the reason that he said that? Why would he say, "Don't go into physics, go into technology"?
He was very clear. He said physics had gotten too big, that when he did his work, you could do great experiments and there'd be, a handful of physicists involved. But by the time, I was an undergraduate, physics, you'd have 1,000 people, 1,000 physicists on the big experiments. The dollars were huge. It was a different style of physics, and he found it less satisfying. You couldn't have as much impact as an individual, in his opinion.
Right.
So he was thinking about it himself. He was giving me very good advice as someone young in the field, but it was clear, in hindsight, that he was also struggling with this. And it wasn't too much later that he himself left physics and made a full-time commitment to technology and to his startup company, even though, like I said, he was full tenured professor at Stanford. So, my issue, having this great advice, my issue was, well, I don't know anything about business.
Right.
I'm 20 or 21 years old. I've been very focused on physics. I loved physics. I had, and I also loved the other classes I took at Chicago because it has a great books program. So I'd gotten exposed to a lot of other fields, but I didn't know anything about business. And I realized I couldn't easily make the transition if I didn't find a way to take a crash course in business. And the easiest thing for me was Chicago offered something called a professional options program, where you could, if you got accepted, you could get both your undergraduate degree and your MBA in 5 years. So instead of the normal 2 years, you could get it in 1. So I applied for that and I got in, and then they told me, well, you're going to get your undergraduate degree is now going to be in business, which I didn't even know anything about. So I said, that's crazy. I'm a physics major, and I've taken all these, I took quantum mechanics. There's no business in my education at all. That's the whole point of the MBA. So I decided that I wouldn't accept the professional option program, but they had admitted me into the business school, essentially. So I just became a business school student. I got my undergraduate degree in physics, and I decided I would do everything I could to finish the business school degree in 1 year. So I went through business school in the summer and took a higher course load and got it done. And because high tech, the industry was growing rapidly, I got hired right out of business school. I guess I would have been 23, into digital as a product manager, where my colleagues were 40 years old.
Right.
And I was the youngest guy around, and it was great. I got hired as a semiconductor product manager. Loved it. It was a wonderful experience, and I just kind of moved through the company into these increasingly more responsible roles. And I remember during the when you graduate as you get close to graduation from business school, you begin interviewing for jobs. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing a business school does very well, is they help train you on how to interview, and the employers actually come to the business school to recruit. So there's a pipeline there of potential job opportunities. And I remember a lot of fellow students were interviewing with investment banks and big consulting firms, and I wasn't interested. I wanted to do technology, so I didn't spend any time on consulting. I never interviewed with them. I never. I didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into technology. Was very happy, and then one day I got a call from a headhunter, and they said, they were recruiting for a consulting firm, and I told them I wasn't interested because I was having fun and I thought being relatively productive in the tech industry. And then the headhunter said, "Well, the firm is McKinsey." And at that point, I said, "Okay, I'll listen," because McKinsey had enough of a reputation that I knew that it could offer me something that I was missing.
Right.
And that was, there was a drawback being a part of industry, in that companies are they have their own personality and culture and way of doing things.
Right.
And so over time, you can get to be very good organizationally in a company, because you're so familiar with the people and the processes and how decisions are done. And maybe there's some favors people owe you. So there's some currency you've built up, but it's not transferable. That it's often it's very unique to that company. And I realized that that was happening in my career, and that McKinsey would open things up, that I would be able to serve an array of companies across industry.
So the idea being that you could quickly get to see what the job environment is like at a number of different companies as you consulted for them.
Well, that's the way I would put it is, these companies would come to McKinsey or whatever the management consulting firm happens to be, and they have a problem. And the problems might have some similarities, but very often there are, they're different. So an insurance company has a certain kind of type of problem that they encounter. A high-tech company has a different set of competitive challenges that they have to deal with. A bank as well, and a telecommunications firm, and so on. So there's always some commonality. That's what the MBA is all about. But the expression and the complexities are different, and it forces you to acquire additional skills or get better in particular areas that you might have neglected. So, for example, an insurance company sounds like a pretty boring place to work. I'm sorry, anyone in the insurance business in the audience. By the way, I'm working on a company that's directly related to insurance, so I'm in.
I'm actually the
boat.
naysayer here, where I'm very excited by insurance these days.
Well,
but I'm
which is good. We can
I'm
talk
an
about
odd
that.
duck, and we can get into that.
Yeah, but insurance companies are very, very good at segmentation, at customer segmentation.
What is segmentation?
It's where you look at your customer base and you identify different parts of it, subsets of that behave differently, or have certain characteristics that separate them from others.
Mm.
And
they're like when political parties are looking for voter blocks. and they can
That's
identify
right.
voter
That's right.
blocks.
Yeah, that's a type of segmentation.
I see.
Yeah, and one thing you learn as you study strategy is a good strategy has to be segment specific. That you need that strategy to take into account the particular requirements of a segment. If you treat everybody with a broad brush, it's probably not going to be a very good strategy.
Right.
And so
this is the same in mental health care, which we were just talking to Owen Muir a couple of weeks back here on the podcast, which is you need to have good enough categories that the diagnosis and treatments, good enough diagnosis categories that the treatments are actually useful to those diagnosis categories.
That's right. It's something that cuts across so many different fields, but a lot of fields don't do it well.
Right.
But insurance does it well. So that it's an example of the problems that you encounter in other industries can really raise your skill level in a particular area that you can then apply it to other industries. So the cross-industry ability or kind of work stream that a good management consulting firm can bring to you is very attractive. I think if you look at why one would consider consulting as a career, why enter consulting, I think that for me is the primary one. I like to solve problems, and so what is brought what a company like McKinsey or whoever does is they bring a wide range of interesting problems across a number of industries that you can engage in.
And in some sense, they're a problem aggregator.
That's right. It's like flux in physics. There's a high flux of high stakes problems from a wide range of players. So that's number one. Number two is a good consulting firm will lever the staff. By that I mean they'll have client service support personnel to assist you. So the administrative burdens, for one, are minimized, which allows you to focus on the problem solving. So they might have some excellent reference librarians to help you with the research. They might have some excellent secretarial support staff to help you get things put into a presentable form, and handle scheduling meetings and orchestrating things. You might need some kind of specialized service, and so that can be made available to you. So being levered is another very attractive thing. The third is the training. It's not just this on-the-job training that we've been implicitly talking about, but the formal training can be quite good. If I compare it to an MBA program or good undergraduate or graduate class, the training is often about how you lead, how you manage large groups and keep them flying in formation, how you divide up the labor in a project, how you actually get work done in a business setting, and that involves communication. There's an approach that one takes to addressing a problem that's been worked out over the years. You learn about that.
What is that approach? Valuable. Can we talk about that? What that approach looks like?
Sure.
Because that's
sure.
the whole part of this podcast,
Sure.
is the art of problem solving. So
Yeah.
if you could break down sort of what you learn, maybe it fits in with our second half of framing. What does that, how does a consultant, or how do you get trained to frame a problem?
Well, why don't we talk about
Maybe there's a case study that would be useful here.
Yeah. If we compare it to, say, scientific problem solving, consulting as a problem solving profession, and science is another type of problem solving profession. They have some similarities. Scientists and consultants, I think, at the end of the day, are advisors. So they have that kind of common role or common point of view, but it quickly diverges. I would say scientific problem solving is more descriptive, more explanatory, whereas in business and consulting, it's prescriptive, it's more regulatory in nature. So in science, you're looking at describing how to control some kind of natural process, like electrical conductivity in a semiconductor.
Right.
In business, you're looking at controlling an economic process, like the cost to manufacture a semiconductor. So it's more, one is more descriptive, the other is more prescriptive, more
descriptive, as in saying not only how do you change the conductivity in a semiconductor, but having that full description of how doping modifies the bands and how the band structure on the silicon reveals different conductivity properties as you dope it differently, and just like the whole description. Is that what you're talking about? Is the
it's a little different. I think maybe the simplest way to describe it is a consultant at the end of the day recommends an action, that there is some action that has to be taken,
right,
to solve the problem. In science, there's really no action that resolves the problem. What resolves the problem is a compelling description based on evidence and logic, and so that's where it ends. But with consulting, it ends with action. So that's kind of the difference in terms of descriptive versus prescriptive. But it's more than that too. If you look at the problem itself, in science, the problem usually involves some kind of theory, right? There's a discrepancy with the theory, or something can't be explained, and so there needs to be a theory. Whereas in consulting or business, the issue is there's a desired state that's not being realized. So that is the nature of the problem is different in that regard. And the statement of the problem is similarly different, that in science you would state it, say, in the form of an equation, whereas in consulting it's stated in the form of a framework. The framework describes the desired state, the way it should be.
Right.
And then after that, if you look at the solution, in science, it might be a calculation of some result. In consulting, it would be an analysis that yields results. And then there's, in terms of testing, you've got an experiment on the science side. In consulting or business, there might be market research or a prototype that's built. And then even things like the way the results are accepted is different. That in science, the results are accepted based on the quality of the logic, the quality of the data, of the analysis, the evidence. And in consulting and in business, the logic and the data and the evidence have to be there, but there is much more politics involved, where you have to understand what the organization is capable of absorbing.
Not only what is the optimal solution, but what's the actually actionable solution given the social constraints of the organization and the legal structure of its operations.
Exactly.
I see. And so, is that often the big factor standing in the way of some sort of optimal solution to something? Is it often the case that you say, well, this, if you could do this, this would be great, but you have to consider the pension plans and who needs to, or all these various factors that you can't just fire off this whole team and hire up this new team or whatnot.
That's a very significant complication that you can't avoid, and it does make it much more difficult. There are cases where the answer ideally is clear, but practically it's not feasible. You have to find some kind of accommodation or something that properly accommodates the constraints that exist.
That's a fascinating extra layer, really, to have to think about all the different social nuances that go into actioning a solution. Because when you're not just packaging a description of something, the solution isn't just a description of the process. The solution is an action. Then to actualize that action requires a whole lot of other skills that maybe aren't included in the scientific process, simply because that isn't. What the scientific process isn't truly about making actions. It's about describing processes.
That's right. And those actions have to be managed. That you might embark on a program and then find that it needs significant adjustment because you've encountered things that you didn't expect, or something might come up, and so there's a constant management aspect that has to go on. Yeah, you really can't leave it alone. You have to see it through.
So I want to dive into a case study of sorts, into something that I'm now recently getting interested in, and something that you've been thinking about for quite some time, which is healthcare, how it works, how it ought to work, what types of changes you imagine are going to be coming about around the bend in healthcare and health insurance and healthcare markets. And I know you do a lot of thinking about this. In fact, you have a paper that you wrote called Measuring Value in Healthcare. Is that what it's called?
Right. That's right.
And so, I mean, I want to leave that open-ended and see where you'll take this, because you're really the expert, not me. And we just had on another fellow, Owen Muir, who's a medical doctor, talking about these things in the context of mental health care insurance and mental health care at large. But maybe what's the 1,000-mile view of this?
Well, I love this question. I founded a company called iValue, which focuses on creating value from technology, which usually means developing a technology strategy. And it's based on the book that I wrote. The company iValue is based on the book. The book lays out our methodology and our approach. And when it came out, I got invited by Columbia to speak at their Department of Biomedical Informatics. And I accepted, after which I realized I didn't know anything about healthcare. So this is a theme, I guess. And so I read up on it. And in the course of educating myself, I came across a paper on the most expensive medical conditions in the United States. And in that paper, there was a table that listed these conditions and the costs associated with them. And it turns out, if you look at that table, there's a pattern in the data. And the data follows what's called a ZIP relationship, which means the cost is inversely proportional to the rank.
Right. So actually, can you get so this is one of my favorite topics: heavy tail distributions. God, I'm a nerd. The fact that I just said that sentence. Heavy tail distributions are one of my favorite things. So sometimes they're called Pareto distributions around the internet. People have Professor Jordan Peterson at the University of Toronto has made the Pareto distribution very popular. Some people in linguistics call it Zipf's law. In mathematics, I'm sure you would know that we call it power laws.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
In fact, that was said in your paper, so I know you know that that's what they're called.
Yeah.
And then there are a number of other people who have this law named after them because this law shows up over and over and over in all sorts of data types. So can you describe what you mean when you say that just for the lay person, if you will, what is the power law distribution, or in this case, the Zipf's law, or whatever you want to call it, in the context of healthcare?
Yeah, what it means is that there's usually something complex going on. If you see something like a ZIP relation, it's a power law, and power laws are pervasive in complex systems. They show up everywhere, and there's some intuition for why that's the case, which we can go into later if you'd like. But but it suggests that there's something going on that's worth looking into, and so that got me motivated to go deep and see, well, what is actually happening in healthcare?
Watch out, the microphone's now away from you.
Yeah. So what is actually happening in healthcare that would result in this power law relationship?
Right. And what is the power, if on the graph, what is the power law relationship?
Well, for the most expensive medical conditions, it's almost like a Zipf law, but Zipf is 1 over the rank, where the exponent is 1, and it's a little bit different than 1.
What is the rank? Just for people.
Oh, rank is just the most expensive medical condition is rank number 1. The second most is rank number 2. The third is rank number 3. And so what the relationship is that if you look at the most expensive medical condition, the second most expensive medical condition is roughly half of the first, and the third is roughly a third of the first, and the fourth is a fourth of the first. So that's the relation.
And it keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
That's right, as you go down.
And in some sense that means, and this is also how wealth is distributed in a lot of different countries. This is how mass in stars is distributed. The idea being that this occurs often in a dynamic sense, and I'm not sure if this is the reason, but one of the ways that you can imagine you can get a distribution like this is when the rate of accumulation of something is proportional to the amount of that something that already exists.
Yes. I think that's called a preferential process.
Yeah, the preferential attachment, which was, who's that, Badabasi at North?
I think so.
I think it's Badabasi who really made this popular.
Yeah. There's actually a bunch of different mechanisms, sample space reducing, self-organized criticality, multiplicative.
Per Bach, How Nature Works, I think, is the big book on
That's
on
right.
this.
That's it's a very interesting field. And scaling, anything that has a scaling relationship, and that's kind of invariant under scaling, looks like a power law.
Scale-free phenomenon.
Yeah, scale-free phenomenon.
Yeah. Meaning, and this is just for everyone at home. By the way, there's a great. I guess I'll put the link. I'll put a number of links in this video, but one of the links I'll put in is there's this great quick series on how statistical physicists look at scale-free phenomena on the Santa Fe Institute Complexity Explorer. They have this great quick series. I can send it to you too. I think you'd really like it.
I think I've seen that. Yeah.
And it talks all about these sorts of things. But I think the rough way of looking at things like, of course, Leo Kadanoff, University of Chicago, was working on
exactly
these sorts of problems with the renormalization group. And all that is being said here is that if you take something and you zoom out, it looks the same zoomed out as it does zoomed in.
That's right. And
that's scale free. That's related to fractals. That's related
right.
to, that's all related. I mean, all these things are weirdly related within the field of complexity. You have fractal dynamics, you have, or fractal dimensions, you have, anyway, you have very interesting field, a lot to unpack. But if we were just to talk about the power law distribution, what you're saying, just so I can tail us back into the thing and do the podcast host thing, is we're saying that the most expensive healthcare category of patients is here. The second most is half as expensive. The next one is a third as expensive.
That's right.
The next one is a fourth as expensive.
That's right.
And it keeps decaying in this way.
That's
but
right.
It never reaches zero.
No. Yeah. It would. Well, there's some people who never get sick, in the course of a year.
Sure.
So that would be something close to zero. But the thing that's a signature of something going on in healthcare. And so I looked into it. And what I found was that there's a fundamental connection between healthcare expenditures and mathematical finance, where both follow a similar process, not exactly the same, but similar. It's a diffusion process. Healthcare actually has another term. It's an infusion, what I call an infusion-diffusion process. But you can think of it this way, that conceptually, healthcare and wealth management are efforts to control a similar process. The model that's used to manage financial assets is basically the same model that can be used to describe healthcare expenditures. And the implications are actually, I think, very significant. It suggests that the machinery of the financial markets can be brought over and applied to healthcare. That healthcare management and wealth management are kind of mirror images of each other. They're almost like one's the reverse of the other, and so that this incredible machinery that we have, here in New York and Wall Street, of financial markets, contract markets, can be brought to bear in healthcare.
Is this because, can I preempt this and ask,
Sure.
see if I understand? Is this related to a couple of weeks ago, once again, when Owen, our previous guest, was talking about making money by buying the risk of health? And I'm wondering if there's some relation, because I know basically what you're doing when you're investing is you're buying risk, and then you're either that goes up or that goes down. I may be way off base here.
No, you're absolutely right.
As in, is there a way to use financial instruments to buy and sell risk in health insurance markets?
Absolutely. So what you have with healthcare is, the economic objective in healthcare is to decrease the rate of growth of expenditures, right?
Right.
Whereas in wealth management, the economic objective is to increase the rate of return on your investment.
Right.
Right. So,
Oh.
so that's kind of the dynamic. So the question is okay, knowing that healthcare is kind of the reverse of wealth management, how would you go about managing risk better in healthcare? Well, in healthcare, there's two types of risks. There's the risk of getting ill, which is a natural risk. It's, that's an actuarial thing. You can, there are incidence rates for different types of illnesses, heart disease, whatever. And so there's that risk, the risk of getting ill, but then there's the risk of once you get ill, how much is it going to cost?
Right.
So there's a price. That's a price risk. What are
Right.
you going to have to pay? And that's where we come in. That's where I have another company, which is obviously a spinoff from iValue, where we are working on something that will allow you to hedge against price risk. And so what we offer is a new way to price and contract in healthcare by trading bundled payment contracts on an exchange. And an example of a bundled payment contract is something like one coronary artery bypass graft for, say, Q1 delivery at the Cleveland Clinic. Now, as you know, healthcare is a very large market. It's $3 trillion a year here in the United States. It's 18% of our GDP. It's twice the size of the energy sector. But few realize that it's also a massively inefficient contract market, where trades between patient and provider are often deemed invalid and reimbursement denied by a guarantor that's unreliable. And that is namely the insurance company. And why are they unreliable? It's because a wide price variation impairs its role as an insurer.
As well as price non-transparency, where it's not even clear. Is this correct? Where it's not even obvious what the price is going to be ahead of the time of the operation.
Absolutely, that's part of the problem. And
as in, when you go into the doctor's office, they don't give you a sticker price and tell you this is what you're going to pay.
Exactly.
They say, "Come on in." Yeah. It would be like if you went to the grocery store to buy a banana, and then you say, "What's it going to cost?" And they say, well, "I don't know."
Yeah.
And you say, "Well, but you can have the banana," and then you walk out the store and you get tagged with a $30,000 banana bill.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. For employers have difficulty controlling the cost of their health plans.
Right.
Hospitals have difficulty managing their revenue, and both of them, frankly, all of us suffer from deadweight transaction costs in healthcare that are 20 to 30% of every dollar spent in the commercial market.
It may be the reason for the stagnation of the middle class purchasing power.
I think there's strong evidence for that, because healthcare costs have been going up and up and up much faster than inflation.
Yep.
And if you're a business and you have employees, you have to pay wages and you have to pay for benefits.
Right.
And if the cost of benefits is going up rapidly, the wages have to suffer.
Right.
So a lot of the stagnation in our wage growth, I think, can be directly connected to the increasing cost of healthcare. And it's become a major issue for employers, large employers.
Right.
So U.S. health futures, we're trying to fix this.
So let's actually start with that. Because this is the first time we've introduced the concept of the podcast. What are futures? What are futures markets?
Futures, they're contracts.
Okay.
Actually, a great example of a future contract is a bundled payment in healthcare. This example I gave of one coronary artery bypass graft for, say, Q1 delivery at the Cleveland Clinic.
So right? What does that mean?
That would be
break that down for.
So it's basically one medical procedure.
Yep.
So a particular medical procedure, and there's a delivery date. So say Q1 of next year.
Got it.
And then it will be delivered at a particular location, the Cleveland Clinic, which is well known for its, I think it's ranked number 1 for treating heart disease, and it's located in Cleveland.
Got it.
That is when you attach a price to that. If you deliver that in exchange for cash, that's a contract. That's
so
a
you
contract
buy that contract with the Cleveland Clinic. Who writes the contract?
A Cleveland Clinic would sell that. They would offer that for sale on our exchange.
I see.
And it could be purchased by Walmart or Boeing or whoever.
Oh, any company that's self-insuring their employees.
That would be the natural market for this.
You would say that one of my employees needs a coronary bypass.
Right.
I will buy the coronary bypass at the Cleveland Clinic from this exchange.
That's right.
Oh.
And you can buy and sell them. So as you need. So if you have a large number of employees, you could do the actuarial analysis and forecast how many of whatever medical procedures are predicted will be consumed. You can purchase those in a free, competitive, predictable market from providers that can are high quality. Centers of excellence is one of the terms used in the industry. And if you find that your forecast is off, you can sell them. So you've got a market, a transparent market, where the price is known, the contract is specified for healthcare, and you're hedging against price risk, because when you buy those contracts, you're locking in a price.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've budgeted for for a particular health plan, from that budget, you've determined how much your policy premiums should be. Through this contract market, you can lock in what your costs will be, and you have predictable pricing. You have predictable costs. So just for those who are very technical, what I described is not normally the classic definition of a futures contract. It would be something called more like a forward contract. And that's because futures contracts today are indexed. So it's like the S&P 500 index. There's futures contracts against the index. So this is a kind of a technical issue, but I just want to kind of go on the record so no one gets confused that the way our company is going to evolve is we begin with what are called bilateral agreements, which it's a very classic traditional contract between two parties. It is an old-fashioned contract, and that would be where a Fortune 500 company directly contracts with a hospital.
Right.
Okay. And then from that, we will standardize those contracts so they can be traded in volume. And then once they've been standardized, they'll be cleared, which means that they're it takes out some counterparty risk. That the risk that somebody won't write the check or the check won't cash gets eliminated. And then the last step is we have a futures contract, which, like you see talked about all the time, when the stock market results are being described, and that will be indexed. So our company will evolve along this way. The long-term goal is futures contracts, but we're going to start with these more traditional types of contracting arrangements. So that's just by way of clarification.
No, that's good to hear. So then I think one of the keys here, if I'm understanding correctly, is that you would not be selling these to direct to consumer. I'm sure someone could buy them if they wanted, but you're selling them to the companies that are the employers. And the reason for this is this avoids the price inelasticity problem of healthcare cost, right? Can you talk about price inelasticity and why that's a problem and how this helps solve price elasticity if it does?
Yes. It's not so much price elasticity. Well, maybe we can get into that, but the reason why we're targeting employers as opposed to the general public buying these contracts is because of segmentation, which we talked about a while ago.
Right.
That employers, the largest employers, will be purchasing these contracts in volume. And so from the standpoint of our strategy, the strategy by which we as a company move from being a startup to a full-fledged venture, a full-fledged operating company, if we target these large employers, they will bring volume quickly and catalyze market formation. And they're also sophisticated. They can do the actuarial work. They're staffed to do that. A lot of Fortune 500 companies have trading desks because they buy and sell contracts for raw materials in their other lines of business.
Oh, I see.
Including banks. Financial services is a very large consumer and user of these contracts. So these
are the organizations equipped to properly gauge the value of and then purchase and sell these sorts of contracts.
Yeah, it's really for our purposes. That we're targeting them because they will accelerate our growth and rapidly catalyze market formation. Over time, I could see that individuals could come into the market and buy or sell. Not really sell. Well, sell if they bought something that they didn't want to, no longer felt they needed. But they couldn't sell like a hospital would sell, where the hospital actually has real capacity to deliver. So an individual in that regard would be more like a speculative trade. So in the long run we could get there, but that's not where we're heading in the short term.
How do you get hospitals to sign up for this?
Well, they have a lot to gain. Basically what we're trying to fix this massive inefficiency in the market, the lack of price transparency and these egregious deadweight transaction costs. And to fix it, we're trying to organize the market as a properly functioning contract market by posting prices and developing contract trading on an exchange. And so if you look at both the economic and social benefits, they're substantial. For let's talk about employers first, then we can talk about hospitals. For employers, they will see the uncertainty in prices be vastly reduced. So this wide range of prices that today, you can, in San Diego, for a procedure, you can go to the UC San Diego, or 5 minutes away, you can go to Scripps and find that there's a 5-fold difference in the price that you're going to pay with no difference in outcome.
Right.
So
the same treatment costs 5 times more and is no more effective.
Is no more effective. And this has been documented in the academic literature.
Absolutely. Tons of examples of this.
So for employers, the price uncertainty should be vastly reduced, and prices will also come down. There's something called reference-based pricing, which Anthem, the insurer in the California market, has experimented with, and it has shown that when you take this kind of pricing action, prices will come down. And then lastly, access to care for employers will go up. And that gets into hospitals. How do hospitals benefit? Well, hospitals will always be in network. If they choose to participate in this market, which is easy, then they'll be in network. So
to everyone.
They're
a network for every hospital then.
Yeah, every hospital.
Every hospital is a network for every company and every person.
Exactly. The way the price variation is being handled today is through insurance contracts as best they can, which means they steer. They have limited networks. You're in. There's out of network or there's in network. They cut out hospitals. They cut out providers, which is a problem for hospitals. And it's a very crude instrument to manage price risk.
Totally.
And then those contracts get very complicated, and of course they're all negotiated in a back room.
And
so it's kind of a farce to begin with.
And because they're all negotiated with a large number of people having to be involved, that cost gets passed on because there is a large cost to hiring all the people who do the negotiation and handle all the rest of it.
Well, then the contracts differ for every insurer. So the hospital has to have staff to handle all of the different types of contracting arrangements that have been made. It's a mess, and it's not competitive pricing at all. It's that we can get into that if you'd like, but it's not a competitive market.
Is there a concern of price inelasticity? This is something that I'm always worried about, right? Where one of the arguments goes, is that a cancer biopsy you'd be willing to pay anything for because it's your life on the line. So you as an individual consumer would be willing to pay any price if your life is on the line. I suppose the question is how does this solve the problem of price inelasticity in some way?
It does. The fact that people are price insensitive to healthcare will always be the case. But what will differ is they won't be taken advantage of. That today, prices in healthcare can go up and up and up, and people will pay them because it's their healthcare.
One of the rules out of the book I was showing you. I can't. What was the name of the author? You liked the author. She's in the New York Times.
Rosenthal.
Elizabeth Rosenthal's book was that prices will rise to whatever the market can bear, which is different than the normal economics rule. It's not supply and demand.
Price elasticity basically means
prices will rise.
You can charge whatever you like and you can get away with it.
Right. That's
which is what's happening. But in a transparent, competitive market, you're going to have the great providers out there having to compete with each other in a transparent market.
Right.
And so if you've got a great hospital like the Cleveland Clinic or another great hospital like the Mayo Clinic or Johns Hopkins. There's a lot of great hospitals. And if they're out there in a open competitive market, they're going to have to compete for the business of employers. And it is actually true that hospitals are price takers. So that if a hospital is negotiating with an insurer, or has to compete in a open public market, and they have a choice of lower your price or you're not going to get volume, they'll lower their price. So while it's true that consumers are price inelastic, that they'll pay what they have to pay to get better, it's also true that hospitals have to compete, that they have to that they're sensitive to volume, that if they can't get volume, they've got a problem. So if you open up these markets and you have employers buying healthcare services and you have hospitals providing them, you will find that a market price will emerge. It'll be a transparent price. It'll be a competitive price. If the profits that price generates are high, hospitals will add capacity. Hospitals will increase supply to meet the demand, and you'll get a normal functioning market. That's what we're trying to do, is organize the healthcare system as a properly functioning contract market. And things like counterparty risk goes away for a hospital. A high value hospital provider can gain market share. A Cleveland Clinic, who's number one in heart disease, can get more volume sent its way because its price is known and people can access their services easily. And also patients, we can't forget patients here. Patients benefit because bundled payment contracts drive more coordinated care. And more coordinated care through bundled payments has been shown to improve outcomes and quality.
Right. So bundling is good, but my question is for the audience: what is bundling? As in, can you make clear what bundling payments means?
Bundling means there's one payment for treatment of a medical condition. So if you need your knee replaced, the bundled payment for a knee replacement will include the pre-op, the costs, lab tests, that kind of thing, the operation itself, which means the hospital, the physicians, the anesthesiologists, the whole kit and caboodle, and then even the post-op recovery is included, plus usually a 90-day warranty. So if there's any complications that arise after the procedure is done and you have to be readmitted, some kind of repair has to be made or additional treatment prescribed, that's also covered. So you're not guessing what it's going to cost you to get your knee replaced. It's There's a single price, and everything is bundled into it.
And I think part of the key here may be, right, with bundling, is that, let's say, for instance, you and I own a company with an X number of employees, and we purchase 50 coronary bypasses for delivering Q1 from the Cleveland Clinic. And then 50 is probably a high number. Let's hope we're not paying for 50. But just as
but
an
by
example,
the way, I think there are hundreds of thousands of those performed every year.
Right. So let's say we have a big company, so we're buying 50, and so then how would you say, the hospital can make money if in fact we don't exercise our right to have a coronary bypass. Is that part of the idea?
Yeah, if you let the contract lapse and you haven't asked that the procedure be performed, that it be delivered, then they've
gotten paid for a bypass that they didn't perform.
So
they've made money. They've made extra money for not having to have performed it, which is I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying that's actually a good thing.
That's true.
So there's an example that I'm aware of from, I can't remember what health insurance company was doing this, but they wanted to pay less on heat strokes for inductions due to heat ptosis for a bunch of Medicare Advantage patients in California. They didn't want to have to pay for the hospitalizations associated with heat strokes. So what they did is they went around and they called up all the senior citizens as part of this Medicare Advantage plan add on. I don't really fully understand how this health insurance company worked financially on the back end, and they said, "Do you have air conditioning?" And for the people that said no, they said, "Well, we're shipping you an air conditioning unit." Why would you do that?
Yeah, okay.
Because the air conditioning unit was cheaper than the hospitalization that would have resulted if they had heat stroke.
This is a great point. This is going to drive innovation in healthcare in a way that I think will be breathtaking.
Right.
That just on the hospital will make money, but they had to reserve capacity, and so it's not totally free. But
another point is we can buy and sell that content. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
But on the innovation front, I think this is a personal view that if we move this direction to this competitive market approach to buying and selling healthcare, that it'll be like airline deregulation and the deregulation of the telecommunications industry, where when that happened, there was an explosion of innovation. It's amazing to me that the other day, I did a Zoom call, and basically that was video telephony over a broadband network, which is kind of the ultimate in telephony. And it cost me zero. That is directly traceable to the deregulation of the Bell system. And the airlines, it's the affordability of air travel. Almost anybody can travel now on an airplane,
right? Which
wasn't the case before deregulation.
Before, you used to get dressed up in a suit because it was a big deal for you to get on an airplane.
So I think this will be as big as deregulation, and we've already got. The pandemic has been awful. It also has been instructive. I think it's truly remarkable that in terms of vaccine development, a typically 10-year development cycle has become 10 months. When the incentives were lined up and the regulations cooperated, we had incredible innovation. It's not just one vaccine. We've got a handful of effective vaccines, two of which, the Pfizer and the Moderna, in my view, represent the most advanced medical technology around. It's mRNA. It's fabulous
Yeah.
that has occurred. And I think that is revealing. It suggests that the amount of innovation yet to be made in healthcare is breathtaking. And I think our incentives are all screwed up right now. A lot of people are making a ton of money off of the inefficiency, but I think it's just a matter of time. And frankly, it's taking much longer than I expected. I'm hoping, I'm recalibrating my expectations in terms of change. Having grown up in the tech industry, I'm used to rapid adoption of innovation. But I think in healthcare, I'm hoping that the changes we're talking about occur in my lifetime.
Right.
It's unfortunate that that's the case, but it's very, very hard to change a system where so many people are making so much money off of the status quo.
And there is so much money to be made in increasing the efficiency, though, right? Because when you look at our healthcare costs, 20% of the U.S. economy is spent on healthcare.
That's
and
right.
10% compared to other developed European nations, for instance, also compared to Singapore and Japan.
Yeah.
So that means that there's 10% of the U.S. economy which is capable of cycling out of healthcare and into other industries or whatever might be the next thing.
That's right.
And so we've bricked ourselves by 10%, which is in the grand scheme of things, the biggest amount. I mean, to put it in context, right, with the telecommunications market, that amount of inefficiency that got reduced as the modern tech companies came out was much smaller of a reduction in inefficiency than it would stand to make in the healthcare industry. So if people thought the Silicon Valley boom looked big, they're not. That's correct. The size of the healthcare revolution, if it comes about in the United States, is going to be 2 to 3 times as big.
Yeah, healthcare is our largest industry after the government itself.
Right.
It's worth making a comment here that you can look at what we're trying to do with U.S. health futures as a kind of Obamacare 2.0, where Obamacare put the buying of and selling of insurance policies on an exchange. We're putting the buying and selling of healthcare services in the form of these bundled payments on an exchange. I think importantly, this centralized public market that gets produced in the process is a very attractive alternative to a single payer system that gets talked a lot about as a way to fix the problems in our healthcare system. Of course, a single payer system means the government is the payer.
Can you steel man that position?
Can you what?
Okay, so you're familiar with the idea of a straw man.
Yeah,
argument.
well,
the steel man is making the best possible version of that argument. Can you steel man the single payer healthcare position? Give the best possible argument that you can think of for it?
I think the best possible argument is the argument that's made for it, which is it should improve access, it should lower costs. And,
how will it do that? Just to get more specific.
Well,
why is a single payer?
Everybody will be insured, so you'll kind of have
increased access is clear.
So universal coverage, and costs should come down because the single payer, the administrative costs should be reduced. You don't have contracts with all these different health insurance negotiated in a back room. There's basically one contract. The government.
I think the simplest explanation I've heard for this idea is simply that the bargaining power of a health insurance company is proportional to the number of members.
Mm-hmm.
So the more members you have, the more bargaining power you have, because you can say, look, if you're not going to meet this price that I put on the table, we're walking with all of the people
That's
we
right.
insure. And so if the US government is the only person who insures anyone,
Yeah.
they say they have massive bargaining
They
power
have no,
at the table.
there's no choice.
You have no choice. You
You
either
have to
take the number or you.
That's right. It's like Medicare.
You're donezo.
Medicare rates are set by the government. That's it. There's no negotiating, no debate on that. If you're a hospital,
Of course, Singapore is interesting in that they actually just set that all private insurance companies have to get the same rate.
yeah,
And
that's
they-
a multi-payer approach
of doing a similar thing.
Yeah. So,
I think Japan does something similar. Germany does something similar. I may be mixing these countries up.
Also, I believe Virginia or Maryland.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Maryland.
Yeah, I think
Maryland.
There's one state, at least one state here in the U.S. that does that.
I think you're right. It's Maryland.
But I think the last thing is the quality can improve. Or it shouldn't decline. But so that's kind of
That's the single payer
access,
argument.
cost, and quality. I think is the steel argument.
Right. That's the Medicare for all argument.
Right. The problem is that if you go the single payer route, you've moved 20% of our economy, or maybe 10%, but it's the second largest. You've moved that part of the economy into the government, and the government's already roughly 30% of the economy.
Right.
So you're going to have almost half of the economy now under government supervision. And that's not good for innovation in a field like healthcare. So that's why we think our approach is very attractive compared to a single payer system. What we offer is a centralized public market. So costs should come down, access should go up, and because they're bundled payments, quality should improve. So relative to a single payer system, we're competitive in that regard, but we also have the advantage of the market, that the incentives, the market forces are unleashed that will drive innovation in every branch of healthcare. And it's not like it happens once. This is a system.
Right.
It perpetuates. So there's innovations one year, and then there's innovations the next year, and the next year, and the next year, so long as science and other sources of innovation remain productive and active. So we find, you can tell we've convinced, I'm convinced this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And even though the rate of progress is dauntingly slow, I think it's just inevitable that something like this will happen.
Now, have you considered, there's a lot of hoopla out there, and I don't know how much I believe in all of it, but there's a lot of hoopla out there about cryptocurrency and smart contracts and the rest of it. Have you touched on any of this? Have you considered any of this instead of going through an exchange?
Only in passing. Actually, Bitcoin.
It could give you a good buzzword for venture capital investment.
Yeah, well, that's true.
You're going to do it on the Ethereum blockchain, and you're going to use smart
in some
contracts.
respects, when you standardize these contracts, it is highly automated.
Right.
The contracting process. You literally buy and sell these contracts like they're not securities, they're contracts, but the efficiencies are like that. So the automation you see in Wall Street, there's absolutely no reason that a lot of that can't be ported over and applied in this case. with regard to blockchain and that and Bitcoin and that kind of thing, there might be some advantages in terms of, maintaining this kind of audit trail. I really haven't thought of that. We've got enough on our hands
Totally.
to layer another thing on it. But I'm not necessarily averse to it, and certainly if it'll help, I'm open to it. I am worried about Bitcoin, though.
Not everything is Bitcoin. The idea is using a similar technology with proof of stake instead of proof of work, which is how Bitcoin works. You can essentially have contracts which are between two individuals that will get, when executed, a certain amount of payment happens or something happens between once you've proven that something occurs between two individuals, and that can, like, I don't fully understand the system, but it is a automated system, a decentralized system for buying and selling contracts.
Yeah.
And it's because what you're doing is buying and selling contracts.
Right.
And if you wanted to skip the regulation, if the regulation is what's making things expensive or time consuming, then perhaps getting a few software engineers and getting an initial hack and seeing if it works would be a fun thing and worth your time. I don't actually know if this makes sense or not.
Wolfram has talked about AIs and automated contracting, and AIs contracting with each other, and I think it's possible. I could see. We were talking about actuaries earlier,
right?
I could see how a company would automate its forecasting of the portfolio of healthcare future contracts, healthcare contracts that it needs to purchase.
Right.
So kind of monitoring its employee population and the using the actuarial tables or incidence rates, that kind of thing, to continually forecast what they should be holding in their portfolio
of that's really interesting. It's your portfolio of medical procedures.
That's right.
And so what you have so you're imagining a future. If we can go predict this into 1,000 years in the future, where you have artificially intelligent actuaries trading over just buying and selling contracts for medical operations.
It would be a blend of an actuary and a trader.
Right.
I think
the actuary determines what the profile
it instructs the trader
on what to buy and sell,
how to rebalance the portfolio.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
What a fascinating idea.
And you can see how, at that point, the transaction, we think the transaction costs through just the regular old financial markets could come down from 20 to 30% to say 5%. 5% is still quite high.
Right.
And that's with today's very, very, very efficient markets. But if we go to the scenario you were just describing, that transaction cost will become very, very small.
So here's one thing that concerns me about healthcare in general in the United States is that I think it stifles innovation for one big reason. Not innovation just in the healthcare market, but everywhere else. In that people have a hard time, even if they have money, quitting their job temporarily because they need those healthcare benefits, or else they're going to get hit with the fake charge master prices from the hospitals,
which are awful.
It's because we have fake prices built into the hospitals in order to make it appear as if these health insurance companies are getting actual 20% price cuts or 50% price cuts on various operations. And so then you get charged the fake price, and if you can't afford it, they will sue you, and they will garner your wages.
Right.
So or garnish your wages. They will take money before it goes into your bank account through their collections agencies. And so the question for me becomes how do we fix that problem so that let's say that I completely lose it and decide that because I have too good of a deal here to give up. But let's say I completely lost it and I wanted to quit my time here at Rockefeller and I wanted to go off and I wanted to found a company, but and I have enough in the bank that I can pay for rent in some place, somewhere for long enough, but I can't handle I can't afford health insurance, but I maybe have an emergency fund in case something happens. I'm young. I shouldn't really need to expect that I'm going to spend a lot of money on some disaster, but maybe it happens. How do we make it so that your ability to get healthcare isn't related to you being employed by some big employer, and that people can strike out on their own and be more entrepreneurial, take more risks, do more? Because I think a lot of people are tied to corporate jobs when they could be making their own companies and forging their own way solely because they're absolutely cripplingly reliant upon the benefits plans.
I think the answer is Obamacare. Obamacare is the individual market. So, if you've lost your job or you're an entrepreneur and you have to get your own health insurance, Obamacare is where you can buy a great policy, and it's standardized. The coverage is very good. And if your income is low, there are subsidies that you can get. And they're cash subsidies. So that premium on your Obamacare health coverage comes way down as your income declines. So it remains affordable.
Right.
So I think I'm a great believer in Obamacare. I think they've done, frankly, a fabulous job of an important step towards fixing our health insurance system, and health insurance will never go away. What U.S. Health Futures is proposing is a way to deal with price risk, which insurers are very poorly suited for. But we are not replacing insurance. Insurance is a way to protect against a peril by pooling a population and sharing that risk. And that's an important mechanism, and that will be there probably forever. But what we offer is a way to manage the price risk through hedging.
I see.
And hedging is a different mechanism for protecting against risk by using what's called an offset. So where insurance is a pooling of assets and sharing the risk, the hedging is where you actually enter into a contract where a price is defined, and if the price moves up or down, your contract, you've locked in that price, and so you're not at risk of that price changing on you.
I see. So you're giving a way to reduce volatility in the pricing of the healthcare.
Yeah. It's actually two things. The volatility will go down because the market, through the market mechanism, the transparency, the dispersion, that distribution of prices will have to compress, because the ones at the extreme, the ones at the high extreme are exposed. So people will say, hey, why are you 5 times more expensive than UC San Diego or whatever?
Right. Because once again, you're standardizing the contracts and you're making it clear, much more clear, that it's not that different where you go for your healthcare.
That's right. So that distribution will compress
to the actual range of differences in outcomes, not to this.
Yeah, exactly. It'll reflect something more sensible,
because it's not. a place that is 5 times more expensive, as you said, is not 5 times better.
Yeah, that's right.
So the breadth will collapse to the actual. Hopefully, will collapse to the actual differences between.
Well, and it might reflect real differences in the cost of providing care.
Right.
With the rents or the physician salaries or something like that.
Presumably, if there's a hospital here in New York, it's going to be more expensive for land costs than it is out in Cleveland.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So,
And then it does 2 things. So you're saying, one, it does that, and then.
Gosh. Yeah.
Well,
boy, why don't we keep going? It'll come back to me.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you're reducing the vol. My statement was that you're reducing the volatility.
Oh, well, the offset. I'm sorry. Yeah, the offset is the other thing.
Talk about the offset.
Yeah, it might be good to take an example from another industry.
Yeah.
Okay. Agriculture.
Great.
Which is the origin of these contracts.
Right.
A farmer would plant their crop. They bought the land, they get the seed, they got the tractor, and hired the labor, and they plant their crop. So they know what it costs, right? But the harvest time is months away, right? So they don't know what price they're going to get for the crop they've planted because it's not going to be ready for months.
Right.
The market price will be determined then. So what the origin of this market is.
Hold on. Yeah. You get a mic hand that's also.
Oh, sorry.
That's also being a gesture. I'm sorry.
So
we need to get mic stands again.
So these contracts were introduced. So a farmer could sell their crop to General Mills,
right,
in advance. General Mills would say, I'll pay you $3 a bushel for your crop.
Mm-hmm.
And the farmer would then know what their profits are going to be because they know their costs and now they know their price.
Totally.
So when it came to harvest time, they can run a business. Their profits are predictable. And same for the producer, right? The producer knows that they've got all these orders for cereal and they need to have the corn or the wheat from the farmer, and they want a predictable cost.
They don't want the cereal box price to be changing by fluctuating massively.
Well, they took an order from a grocery store, and the grocery store said, you're going to charge me $5 a box. So the manufacturer has got to deliver the product for $5 a box.
Right.
So they want to lock in the price of the raw material themselves. So it's good for both parties to do that.
And you lock it in, and then you say, well, one of us is going to swallow some cost. One of us is going to make some extra money because of this contract.
Well, what happens is, when it comes to harvest time, if the price is moved up or down, okay, one of the parties would have benefited, and the other party would have lost.
But on an iterated game basis,
but the contracts. The contracts offset each other. The contract offsets that. It locks it in, and so it's a different way of managing risks.
Right.
And that actually gets to the origin of the market itself. It came out of the ag business.
Got it. So it's a way to make sure that prices. While there are winners and losers here, it keeps a little bit in terms of.
Well, there would be later on, but
anyway.
Actually everybody's a winner with these contracts because they have predictable profits on both sides. They've taken out that risk. the price risk has been removed.
The price risk is the risk of the massive fluctuations
Of the
in price.
fluctuation, of getting caught on the wrong side of that.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. And so, well, you can still get caught on the wrong side, but it's still more stable, right? You still bought a contract and the price would have been lower if you had just bought the corn at the market price or whatever.
Well, that's
it was.
true. You know that if the price is lower, not some months later, the producer could have gotten it cheaper.
Right.
So there's an opportunity cost, yes, but they did get predictable profits,
and they were able to make a stable contract with the grocery store and say, we're going to give you this many boxes for this price.
Yeah, well, it could have gone the other way,
right?
And then they would have lost money,
right,
with that grocery store.
Totally.
So I suppose,
is this a case where there's a large fluctuations at a given hospital in price over time as well?
No, the fluctuation occurs where the patient can wind up at different hospitals. And so you might have a contracted rate with a hospital, but it may not be the same contracted rate with another hospital. And insurers can control to a degree where you go, but can't control entirely. So insurers actually would benefit from this market by having what's called a medical loss ratio be more predictable.
As in what? What's the difference now? So how does it increase the amount? So if the fluctuations in price mainly come from individuals deciding to go to different hospitals, how does this system fix that problem?
Well, that's the problem of going to different providers, different hospitals is the problem today. And that's because that distribution is wide.
Right.
But in the future, if that distribution is narrow,
then that's not
it doesn't really matter.
That's not as big
much.
an issue.
Yeah.
I see. So the price transparency narrows it, and then you now also additionally have the options to handle temporal fluctuations by way of these contracts. There's like two different types of fluctuations here, right? There's fluctuations in price over time, and there's fluctuations in price
spatial
at the spatial based on going to a different place.
Yes, that's true. You're right.
So so the first step is you get the spatial handled, and then you fix the temporal fluctuations through these contracts.
Both are fixed. Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. Very cool. Well, thank you again.
Oh, my pleasure.
For coming on today. This is a great conversation to have.
I hope your audiences enjoyed it. And
I even if my audience, I had a great time.
No,
I'm sure they will. I'm a very curious and fun audience.
I know consulting was, the initial series of questions, and there are some very good books that I can recommend for those in the audience who are interested.
Let's hear about it.
The Economic Way of Thinking. I would recommend. There's a book, Valuation, that's quite good. The Pyramid Principle, which describes how to organize a communication successfully for executives, but not just executives. Frankly, it's useful in both your personal and professional lives. That's by Barbara Minto. It's a classic. So those are some of. Another book, which is not really a consulting book. I just like it, and I think it does a really good job of helping understand technology. Is Physics for Future Presidents is a very good book that I can recommend. And of course, if anyone wants to contact me, they can email me at c.gardner@i-value.com.
Great. Perfect. So I'll get those links to those books and your book on the YouTube thing.
Oh, thank you.
On the YouTube description. And so I think that does it. Final question, and you may or may not have an answer to this, but is there anyone as a follow-up to this interview that would be interesting to interview in the New York City area who might come out?
I have some thoughts on that, but there are a range of candidates. So why don't I give you
List
some candidates, and then you let me know which ones are of interest to you, and then I can contact them and make an introduction.
Excellent.
All right?
That would be great.
So,
Thank you so
yeah.
much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Solutions. I'd like to take this opportunity to ask you to subscribe, like, share, comment. All these different types of engagement help bring the podcast to more people and help boost the signal so that we can have a budget maybe in the future to fly guests out from across the United States who I have lined up but can't quite yet afford to get onto the show. As things start to open up, I suspect that there will be a larger cohort of people who will be willing to travel, and I'd like to take that as an opportunity to bring out some of the folks that I have worked with over the course of my career from locations that aren't here in New York City. I'd also like to point out that we have a Discord. I am on there. Currently, we are scheduled for 5 to 7 EST. This is subject to change, but we do math every weekday. Currently, we are working through a textbook on statistical learning, which I have found to be very fun. And I'm working with a number of quite brilliant Discorders. I'm not sure if that's what you call them, but I will call them Discorders to get through the book one section at a time. So you're welcome to hop on with that. And also, I host Q&As every now and again, normally on the weeks where I post episodes. And that will be posted in the announcements channel on the Discord. So feel free to hop on there. We have a fairly large community already, pretty vibrant, I would say. And I look forward to seeing you on there. It's a great way for you to get in contact with me if you want to talk with me about something that you heard or thought about while listening to the podcast episodes and you want some clarification or some further resources. Great place for us to meet. So anyway, once again, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for listening to this episode, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. All right, goodbye for now.